What is up, fam? Thank you so much for tuning in to So Real Sports Talk. I am So Real Sunil. To the side of me, we have the Press Democrats' very own Jack Hammer. Jack is definitely back at his house. You could see it's all 49ered out.
Hi, how you doing, Sunil?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Week 2 is in the books, at least for the 49ers. Came out with another victory. So 2-0. That's the positive stuff. Absolutely. Tell me, after the game was done, and maybe now that you've slept on it a little bit, what's been your overall reaction to the game?
My overall reaction to the game is still kind of where I was when as soon as the game ended. I felt like it was a really good overall team victory. I think that you know the game kind of played out how I thought it was going to play out from a defensive standpoint. I thought the offense was going to be a little bit better, but all in all, when you take everything into consideration, kind of the way that game played out, for them to be able to win that game took all three phases to be able to pull it off, and I think that's the best way to really describe it. It was just a really good team win.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway for me was we saw improvements. I think we saw a lot of improvements from what D'Amico Ryans did from week 1 to week 2, and then I think we saw some pretty poignant adjustments that Kyle Shanahan made from the middle of the second quarter and all second half, as far as getting the ball out of Jimmy's hand fast, because that defensive line was kind of eating us up, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that was my biggest takeaways, is just seeing the coaching actually make some adjustments, which is always good to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we go through and you look at the game, the way that it played out, you know, uh, it really you started to see the Flyers offense move the ball at the beginning of the second quarter, right? They had a
Hmm.
nice little drive going. It wasn't anything, they didn't have the ability to really get down the field. There was just too much stuff going around in the pocket to really be able to go downfield very much.
Right.
Uh, and so you saw them just making little plays, but they had that one nice drive. Those first three and outs were bad, but then the fourth possession of the game is where you started to see Kyle Shanahan changing up the game a little bit. They started to Garoppolo stop throwing bad, missing screen passes, because that was,
Right.
he had two screen passes that he just, totally whiffed on at the beginning of that game, the one to Samuel and the one to Juszczyk. Um, but you started seeing him connecting on those, and the offense had a really good possession there. They didn't get to finish it off because they had that illegal crackback block on Sanu that really killed them.
Right.
Right, that was shooting themselves in the foot. But from that point on, the offense really played. I felt decent. They definitely took over from the second quarter on. The 49ers outgained Philadelphia by about 80 yards, and about 91 of that was on one throw from Jalen Hurts that didn't result in anything in the end, thanks to the
Right.
defense.
And I think that, like you said, said it was a team victory. I think it was that complementary football, that term that you hear all the time on ESPN and all these talk shows, complementary football, where the defense and the offense really coupled together. I think when the offense made those changes, like you talked about, that time of possession, I think was really important, because they got a fresh defense on the field, for each drive, and it really showed up as far as how well the defense played. So we're definitely going to be talking about all of that. Um, Harold Murillo, hello guys, hello to you, Harold. It was my impression that once Graham from the Eagles got hurt, then the offense was able to convert and move forward. Definitely, Graham is a big loss for the Eagles, but I would like to put it more on the adjustments that Shanahan made, as far as how quick the ball was coming out of Jimmy's hands, and them stop pushing the ball down the middle and start doing a lot of those pitches and things on the outside, which was some of their strengths. I think that was more of it. Obviously, Graham plays a role as well. What about you, Jack?
Yeah, well, the Graham thing definitely was a part of it, but they just they kept running those toss sweeps, and they were start dinking and dunking more. I think the other thing too that I don't think gets looked at enough was the first two times they had the ball, The first play of the game is a 4-yard loss, so they're starting out in a bad situation there to begin with, right? So their first play of the game, they lose 4 yards. Now it's 2nd and 14. Garoppolo, you know, buries a ball to Juszczyk, and there was just a lot of little things that happened. I don't know if it was so much of Shanahan changing things up as things just kind of settling down. It was the Eagles home opener. You were all over the Eagles piece, right? You kept telling me that this was going to be a tight game. The Eagles were
Yeah.
better than we thought, and the Eagles defense was, I think, a little bit better than I gave them credit for. Uh, and they were. You could tell in the first quarter, Garoppolo was just off, and it took until the second quarter. They kind of settled down a little bit. Easy, they had a nice little run to start off that one drive and throwing the ball around, and he started hitting those little dinks and dunks, and before you know it, things were on the move. It was an odd game. It was Jimmy Garoppolo, everything that everybody loves about Jimmy Garoppolo, the people that like him, and everything that people hate about Jimmy Garoppolo in that game. And that's kind of the Jimmy Garoppolo experience.
Absolutely. If you were on Twitter, you saw all the Jimmy Garoppolo quote unquote haters be like, bench Jimmy, put in Trey. This is exactly, all this kind of stuff. And then later on the game, all the Jimmy Garoppolo stands started being, more vocal and being like, see, this is why we keep Jimmy in, 2 90-yard drives, all that kind of stuff. So I think it was definitely an entertaining game. A solid victory, like you said. I think all three phases definitely had things they could look at and be proud of and build on, moving forward to the next game. But unfortunately, the game did come at some cost. There were some injuries that happened, some big time injuries, obviously, namely in the running back department. So, Jack, can you give us an update on, what's going on with the injuries in the 49ers and maybe give us a little bit of insight of what you think the 49ers are going to do, especially with that running back room?
Yeah, well, the running back room got hammered yesterday. All three of their main guys got hurt. The only one that didn't was Trenton Cannon, and that's only because he played one snap on offense, and other than that, he was on special teams. You have, I think, Elijah Mitchell. He's got the shoulder. He's day to day. He's probably going to play next week against Green Bay. JaMycal Hasty's going to be out for a while. He has a high ankle sprain, so he might even be somebody that they put on IR because they expect him to be out for at least 3 weeks. So you might see him get put over on the shelf for a little bit just so they can clear up the space to bring somebody else up. Mm-hmm. And then also, the Trey Sermon deal, that was a bad one with his first NFL carry, and he just gets clubbed across the side of the head and then hit again by another helmet. That was a really rough one.
Yeah. So he's probably in the concussion protocol, right?
And he is, and so he's in the concussion protocol. So, who knows if he's going to be around. So right now, the only healthy running back that they have is I'm going to say, well, yeah, Cannon. Mitchell's going to be fine. He's going to play on Sunday. Sunday night. I would bet you if I were betting on this one, I'd say that Mitchell's going to be a go. But still, having only those two guys is scary. And they'll probably bringing up Kerryon Johnson off their practice squad. They had 3 guys in today for workouts. Lamar Miller, Duke Johnson, and TJ Yeldon. And of that 3, the only guy that really I think deserves a shot would be Duke Johnson. Mm-hmm. Although Lamar Miller kind of fits the 49ers mold, considering he's coming off of an ACL injury last year, so he kind of fits what they look for there.
Which one of you guys is coming off a season-ending injury? You're our guy.
That's right. Well, yeah, Miller doesn't have a carry since 2018, I believe it is, because at the beginning of 2019 is when he tore up his knee, so he missed that whole season. Missed all of last year. He signed up with the Bears in around October, I think. He played in one game and had 2 receptions for like 4 yards or 5 yards or something like that. So the one that makes the most sense here would be Duke Johnson for them.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
Duke Johnson, is a capable receiver out of the backfield. And they seem to, obviously Hasty seemed to be that back that they were using a lot in the screen game, not so much Mitchell. So Duke Johnson has done that his whole career. And I think the one thing about Lamar Miller is he's a little bit of a bigger body. And that's one thing that the 49ers are missing if Sermon doesn't play and Hasty doesn't play, is that bigger body. So maybe that's why they look at that. I don't know about Duke's measurables, but I've always envisioned him as more of like a shorter, kind of like stocky type of guy. So So we'll see.
Yep.
Definitely, Mitchell being able to play would be a huge thing. Other than that, we've seen plug and play running backs and people do well. So hopefully everything will be all right.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be a tough. That's what makes it. Shoot, remember back about 4 weeks ago, 49ers had 5 really good running backs in the
Right.
room, and now they have none that aren't already injured. So it's been a rough start to the season for him. And then also Kevin Givens was lost to a high ankle sprain as well, so he's kind of the same thing as JaMycal Hasty. Javon Kinlaw day to day with a knee. Same with Eric Armstead. He still has that adductor deal that he had before. So pretty much, other than those two, pretty much all the same stuff. They're hoping that Emmanuel Mosley's going to be back for Sunday night. That's their hope. And then that brings me to Josh Norman. He was also he had a little deal with his ankle, so he's day to day as well.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, injuries are unfortunately a part of this game. So it's just about next man up, right? But definitely decimated the running back room. That's kind of crazy, right?
It sure did.
We were talking about all the depth there, and now all of a sudden we're looking for replacements. It's insane, right?
Yep.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jack.
I would say that's the negative. That's about the only negative part of today, I think, really.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the game. Against Detroit, we both spoke very, very highly of the offensive line. Jimmy Garoppolo played a pretty clean game. And I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo necessarily, I don't know what the sack numbers were against Jimmy Garoppolo this week, but he definitely was a little more uncomfortable in the backfield. It seemed like the defensive line of the Eagles was able to really impose their will on the 49ers offensive line. And I spoke about it all week, telling people, look, this defensive line is underrated. I think this is one of the better defensive lines in the game. We're not going to be coming up against defensive lines this good. However, some of the teams that we do play and some of the teams that are going to be, teams that we need to beat if we want to win a Super Bowl, namely Arizona Cardinals, the Rams, and obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they all have really, really good defensive lines. So seeing the offensive line get tested for the first time and kind of not really be up to par of where they needed to be, are you worried at all about the offensive line?
No, I mean, they struggled a little bit yesterday, with everything that was going on. It wasn't their cleanest game. Garoppolo didn't get sacked, but a lot of that had to do with him getting the ball out a couple, and scrambling and making some plays on his own as well. When you're running as many screens and the little short stuff as they were doing yesterday, it's going to help them out, right? And that's one of the biggest things here through the first 2 weeks is the quickness that the ball is coming out. I think has been a big plus for the 49ers compared to where they were last year at this. Garoppolo was under 2.4 or around 2.44 seconds yesterday, 2.51 in week 1. So the ball's coming out quick. And some of that obviously is because of the short game. But even on the throw to Deebo Samuel, if you go back and you watch that play, and you can that ball that's perfect. That throw from Garoppolo to Samuel is the perfect example of why Garoppolo is the starting quarterback over Trey Lance, because that ball comes out so early. That ball, he's still behind. He hasn't even clear. The ball's out and he's still behind the linebacker. So that ball's actually being thrown into the hole while he was on the opposite side of the linebacker. I mean, it's not anything as earth shattering. It's just a quarterback throwing with anticipation, knowing where his guy is supposed to get to and put it in the hole, and then your playmaker make the play. But that's something that Garoppolo does that Lance hasn't shown the ability to do yet.
Now, it seems like this running game once again is, predominantly on the outside, and namely the side that Kittle is going to be on, right? So one of the things that we really envisioned is when Alex Mack was brought in, that we could start having more success down the middle. And that just wasn't the case against the Eagles. You're talking about Jimmy getting the ball out quick, which is obviously great.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not seeing the ball necessarily go vertically. It's more horizontally, right? And Jimmy's not the type of quarterback that without time is even going to attempt a ball down the field, a long ball down the field. So when I say, are you worried about the offensive line? Is if the offensive line is going to be kind of beaten like they were against strong defensive lines here, do you expect that our offense is going to have to compensate? Meaning, just these short plays, these dink and dunks, these outside, tosses and things like that, because the offensive line just can't give the backfield enough time to set up anything, anything more explosive.
I see where you're going with it, and that could be a concern. And if it's a deal that happens over every week after week, then yeah, that's a concern. I don't see it being something that's going to be hindering them throughout the season. I think it's a week to week kind of a deal. Like next week against Green Bay, I don't expect to see the offensive line struggling the way that they struggled this week. So you're not going to have to play that kind of a game. So it just depends on who you're going against. Against the Rams, yeah, you might not be able to get the ball out quite as much because Aaron Donald might be giving you fits in the middle.
Right.
So.
Same with Arizona, right? With Chandler.
Yeah, to an extent, Arizona possibly too. So but again, it goes back to it's kind of a week to week thing when it comes to that, and I do think that the offensive line, when you watch that game, they changed over the course of the game. They started the second half, the 49ers imposed their will more with the running game because you saw the 49ers throughout the first half, they kind of stuck with it. In the second half, they definitely were, and they started picking up bigger chunks of yardage on the ground at times in the second half. So they just had to stick with it. That was one of the pieces that I liked about the way that they played. But the offensive line is who they are, and I think Garoppolo is going to help them out a little bit because of his getting the ball out of his hands quick.
Yeah, it was just a little bit disappointing to me, just because I thought that the offensive line looked extremely good against Detroit and against the Eagles. And once again, the Eagles are a really good defensive line. I really wanted to see a little more success from them. It really seemed like they were getting pushed around, and there was an Eagle in the backfield. It seemed like every single play, at one point or another.
Yeah. Well, Garoppolo was definitely pressured a lot more this week than he was week one. There was definitely a lot more pressure around him. I think there was a couple of them from the two guys on the right side. I think there was like 3 or 4 from the right side and a couple from the left side. And he definitely had more guys in his face. The offensive line wasn't getting that push early on. That was definitely the case with those early runs. Brunskill wasn't getting very much push. He got beat on the first down, but I guess that first play of the game, it looks like the Eagles defensive tackle was offsides based on some of the pictures I've seen. But whatever. That's kind of what you saw was the offensive line just didn't get much of a push early in the game, and that's why they had to start going to the toss.
Right. So something to keep our eye on, though, because I think that eventually we're going to get into some games where we need to just outscore and put up 30 points on the board to be able to get a victory. And if the offensive line is struggling, it's going to be difficult to do that if we're limiting our offense as far as having to throw everything short or horizontal versus being able to, go vertical down the field. So I think that's going to be something to watch, moving forward. If this offensive line could be elite or at least be, top shelf, or if they're going to be a weakness where Shanahan is going to have to change the game plan because the offensive line isn't doing their job.
Yeah, they're gonna look better. If the quarterback keeps getting the ball out of his hands quick, they're going to look better. And if they get the run and in week one they got the run game going, so the run game going slowed down that there's just, it's like I said, it's kind of a week to week, and you keep hitting on the fact that Philadelphia's got a really good front. They probably have one of the better fronts that the Flyers are going to face this year, really, other than Arizona.
But it also is a big question mark because the teams that we are going to need, we can't only be dominant against teams with bad defensive lines, right, and expect to be considered a top team. So that's what I'm saying. Like, eventually it's gonna like the Eagles, the defense played amazing, lights out, and we're going to talk about them coming up, which kept the score low enough to where 17 points was enough. But if there's an offense like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Arizona Cardinals that has a combination of both very high-powered offenses plus great defensive lines. Now what becomes the case if all we could do is the tosses and the screens and the quick slants? Are we going to still be able to contend with these teams, or are we just going to be outmatched because our offense doesn't have the time to be explosive? That's kind
I
of
think
what
you're
I feel.
I think you're getting into a little bit different of a topic, which is actually one that I would like to talk about that we didn't have set up, which was one of the things that I've kept hearing, I've heard a lot of in the last was it now almost 30 hours since the game was finished, was the 49ers, how they're going to struggle when they get in. They can, if their offense plays the way that they played in week 1 and this week in week 2, they're going to struggle against the NFC West. They're going to do this. They're going to all this right against the higher power teams. Okay, but you got a defense too, and I think the 49ers defense has been underrated in this whole equation.
Yes.
And I think that you need to look at it from the standpoint of, again, the way that the 49ers won yesterday was because they won as a team. The offense did their part with those long drives. The defense did their part with holding them into the game early until the offense could get themselves under, their feet underneath them. So, the way that I look at it, I know it's 2021. You look back at 2022, the 49ers played these guys really good in the NFC West, and it's week to week, and you can't look at week 2 and think that that's what's going to impact the game of week 4 and week 5, week 10, 12, and 17 down the road, 18,
sure,
and so on.
I mean, I think that this defense obviously is carrying the team at this point. Well, definitely in the last game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily saying that when I'm making these statements, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to struggle against these high-powered teams. What I'm saying is, if they're limited, it's going to make the game harder than if they're able to show multiple different levels. Like, I think against Detroit, they were able to show, throwing the ball down 15 yards, use the middle of the field, things like that.
Gotcha.
Running game was going really well. But against a team where it's high-powered, that they're actually scoring the ball is going to be very, very limited. We just saw, last night, I don't know if you watched the Sunday Night Football game, that game was all, a few defensive stops, but really you had to be able to score in that game. Otherwise, you weren't going to win. It was Baltimore's ability to continue to move the chains. The one thing that I can say that the 49ers can sustain long drives, which can, play, and maybe this is what the game is. It's boring, but play the time of possession game, right? Keep the high-powered offense off the field, and then just go all the way down, drive, and get a touchdown, taking clock off. That could be part what maybe this team turns into, based off of kind of what we see in these first few weeks.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think I go back to it. This was something that I heard today. We had some really high-powered games that went on yesterday. But I think if you took the 49ers defense and you put them up in any of those games aren't quite as high scoring because their defense is going to hold teams down.
Sure.
And the other thing too, it's going to be interesting to watch when we talk about let's get into the defense in a second, because there's some issues I think over there, not that are bad, but which are going to impact the scores of games as well.
Yeah. Harold Murillo says, I'm hopeful that the offensive line will improve each game. The offensive line is building chemistry. This is the first time that Alex Mack is with the line. They will improve. Absolutely great point, Harold.
Mm-hmm.
We do want to see progress week after week. And yeah, this is a brand new offensive line, not just bringing in Alex Mack, but also Brunskill now being the full-time right guard. I think is a change that the team needs to get used to. But we've been said. Go ahead. Yeah,
I'm agreeing with you.
Awesome. So let's get into it. You were kind of segueing our way into there. Let's talk specifically first about the defensive line. This obviously was set up to be the strength of the team. We said when the 53-man roster came out, they didn't cut one defensive lineman, and they wanted the depth, they wanted the rotation, and they wanted this team to be built defensive line first, and have all the other levels play off of that. 2 weeks into this season, is the defensive line playing the way you expected, Jack?
Yes and no. They are in the pass rush side of it, but on the run game is really struggling. They're really struggling to stop the run. And so I say yes, and that the pass rush has been really effective. And I say no because that middle of the defensive line just, yesterday started out good. The first couple of possessions for Philadelphia, the 49ers did a really good job of shutting down the inside run. And then about the third or fourth Philadelphia possession, you started to see them just gouge the 49ers for 5 or 6 yards of carry.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I thought their run defense was a lot better. Maybe not necessarily because of the defensive line. I think Fred Warner stepped up, which was, something we talked about on the pregame show, that he had to have a solid game with all the injuries, especially to Dre Greenlaw. I think that, off of called run plays that the Eagles put out, I think they only gained 60 yards in the whole game. So that is, I think a decent effort. The only thing that really gashed us was obviously Jalen Hurts being able to break containment and kind of just use his legs to be able. He got, I think something like 80 yards just by himself, just all off of scrambles. That's always been one of our Achilles heels. We thought that this defensive line was built a little bit to keep that from happening. What about, these mobile quarterbacks now that you're seeing it? Saw it play out at least the first time. It seems like that's still an issue, right?
A little bit, yes. The thing. Let me touch base real quick. Go back to that running piece again, and I don't. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, and I know the difference between week 1 and week 2 is we didn't see the big 10, 20, 15-yard runs, but what we saw from Philadelphia was there was one point where they had 4 rushes in a row, 6, 6, 6, 9, right? The second time the 49ers punted the ball down and pinned them deep in their own territory, they ran the ball from inside their own 10 all the way out to the 44 on the 49er side of the field. And the only reason what happened there was they decided to start, for whatever reason, their coach decided to start throwing the ball. And that was the downfall of that possession because they had run the ball. I know they had a Hurts scramble was mixed in there, but they were running the ball like crazy right down the middle of the 49ers defense throughout the game. So from that standpoint, that's why I say no. But my thing with this defense, and we talked about it before. Remember how did I tell you this defense was going to play out on Sunday?
Bend, not break.
They were going to give up a lot of yardage in the middle of the field, and they were going to shut them down when they got into the red zone, right, or down into the scoring range. And that's exactly what we saw happen. They did that consistently, and then on top of that, they forced Hurts to. I don't know if the 49ers forced him to, or if it was just the coaching staff of the Eagles. Decided that instead of having him throw, short, they decided they were going to have him get down the field a little bit more, and we saw him, really not play well in the second half. He was only 4 of 8 in the second half.
Yeah, for me, I think the defensive line hasn't reached its peak. We were talking about this defensive line being a top 5 defensive line. I think you would agree too. They're not necessarily playing top 5 level yet until they are able to not only have that pass rush, but be able to stop that run. So, I looked at the numbers. If you take Hurts, scrambles out of it, it was like 19 carries for 69 yards. So to me, that's like a 3.6 average, something like that. To me, I think that's average. That's normal for an NFL team, right? 3.6. If you could keep a team under, at about 3.5 yards per carry,
Sure.
that's I think decent. Obviously it could get better, but yeah, once again, something that we need to see improvement week to week. Definitely not where we need to be to reach the goals that we have, but not terrible either, right?
Yeah, and I think when you look at those averages, they get skewed a little bit because of when they're getting knocked for a loss or what have you, right? There's a little bit of skewage. That's a terrible word, but there's a little bit of skewing of the stats when it looks like that. Just it's similar to Jimmy Garoppolo, right? He was 22 of 30. You look at his numbers, and if you didn't watch the game and see the flow of the game, 22 of 30 for 180 yards, a touchdown, and everything he did, you think he played pretty good. You watch the game, and he played okay, but he definitely wasn't. Other than one throw, it was not a whole lot to write home about.
Yeah, we already have some Jimmy debate in the comment section. Mike Austin says the offense is dormant with Jimmy. Chewy coming in saying Jimmy is a steadying presence for this team. He's not supposed to win these types of games. Supposedly, we couldn't run. They had a good pass rush, and we played a more mobile, talented QB. He still won. Yeah, I mean, and then Harold comes in and says special teams was a difference maker in the game. Credit to the special teams. Absolutely. I mean, I think one thing that is a pleasant surprise is Mitch Wishnowsky, right? We're finally seeing a guy that might be worthy of being using a draft pick in the fourth round for, right? He's been doing a good job at making the teams that were the opposing teams have long fields that they're playing towards. And I think that's really helped out the defense as well, because like you said, I think the defense, you're seeing them not so many 3 and outs, but you're seeing them not cross midfield because they're pushed back so much, 2 or 3 first downs, and then the 49ers could clamp down and still, have it be a punt rather than a field goal.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's those three are all really good examples of that game yesterday. The special teams, right? I mean, Javon Kinlaw getting up and knocking that field goal down was a huge play in the game.
Yeah.
Right. That the blocked field goal there. The offense being a doormat. They were a doormat for the first quarter. That was the first time since Chip Kelly was the head coach of the 49ers that they haven't gotten a first down in the first quarter of a game. I mean, that's they weren't good. Yeah. And then Chewy's point about Jimmy being a steadying presence. If you take those three, that's the whole game in a nutshell right there. And you throw in the defense that we're talking about here. That's the ball game. I mean, it's just crazy how all these layers kind of wove together to create a win for the 49ers.
Yeah, and I think after what happened with Detroit and also what we saw with Philly, I'd be surprised if another coach tries to go for it on fourth down in the red zone, because the 49ers have been over, right? I don't think anybody's been able to go for fourth down. Obviously it's been 2 games, but fourth down and goal and had success. 49ers have been really clamped down on fourth down when people are going for it in their red and green zone. So that's hopefully they could keep that going. But, hopefully scare some coaches away.
It'll be funny to see that. I mean, I can understand why the Philadelphia coach decided to go for it. I mean, at that point in the game, all the momentum kind of feels like it's on your side, right? They're only up 3-0, but you're kind of dominating at that point. You just were pinned back and you make this long throw down the sidelines and everything. You kind of feel like you're playing with house money at that point, and that changed the whole game. They stopped them there. They go down the field and score, and that just shut the whole stadium up. The stadium was quiet the rest of the game. They didn't make noise. It was over at that point, really, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, one other thing about the defense that I saw, and I forget if I brought this. No, I haven't. Okay, so remember I talked about keys to victory is the communication between the corners and the safeties.
Yeah.
Do you remember the play between Lenoir and Jimmy Ward, where they did that same crossing route that they blew in the Detroit game that led to a touchdown? This time they played it perfectly. Lenoir stayed outside with the crosser that went to the outside. Jimmy Ward stayed and played perfect defense along the guy that was crossing down the middle, and it turned into an incompletion, which was could have been a huge momentum changer, right? If they had that confusion, especially with these safeties and corners not playing a lot together, because obviously these aren't the starters that are in there right now. I thought that was something that was very promising to see, that communication is still there. And man, where would we be without the 5th round pick, Lenoir? He is turning out to be, not a superstar quite yet. Obviously, we have to see him against big name receivers, which we might see next week with Davante Adams. But he seems like a cerebral type of corner jack. His body position, he's not like an overly athletic type guy. We saw him get beat that one play, but just that one sideline play that he had with that, could have been a touchdown, but because he played it perfectly, ended up not being a touchdown. And it just seems like he's the best corner we have after the starters or that have been injured. He's really helped us out, and without him, maybe we're talking about a much different, outcome.
Yeah, I do, yeah, definitely agree with you. He's the 49ers. He's going to be a starter for the 49ers all year long. I think if Emmanuel Mosley comes back healthy, you're going to see Emmanuel Mosley on one side and Lenore on the other. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see. I mean, the guy's a 5th round draft pick. All of the angst over the
Right.
over the offseason about the corners, and to have the 5th rounder be so good, that's a good deal, and he's cheap, and if he can continue to improve, it's a good contract for the 49ers.
He seems real humble too. I follow him on all his
He
social
is.
media, and it seems like he's a real humble. And you kind of talked about it, right? He was very shy in the interview process at the press conferences and things like that. So it's going to be one of those guys that I think the 49er faithful will really rally behind. And I think he could be one of those like cult-like type players for the 49ers, much like Mosley has been, because, being an undrafted corner and now, being the starter.
Yep.
Chewy has a question. I've seen Ward struggle in tackling through the first 2 weeks. Have you guys noticed?
I don't know if
Jack?
I don't think I'm going to say that. I don't think I've really seen him tackling. I mean, I know okay. So it depends on, since Chewy's not here, I can't ask him the question. So, the thing with that is, there was the one blown play in Detroit, right, where he has a bad angle and the guy gets by him. So that could, if that's what he's talking about, that could be an example of him having struggling with tackling. The thing that I noticed, or the one time that jumped out to me with him maybe having a little issue, was the 2-point conversion after Philadelphia scored there at the end of the game. I don't know if you noticed that, I did, but Fred Warner basically pushed him out of the play to try to get through the hole to make the tackle. He wasn't really hitting it quite like he'd want him. I mean, he basically got in Warner's way. If you rewatch the play, you'll see Warner shove him out of the way with his left hand, and then so then when Warner gets there to make the tackle, he's late. He's grabbing him he's sliding off the back of the running back instead of being able to get up there and make the tackle. So there's little things like that I noticed, but otherwise, I think he's doing okay. And so what Chewy just said, he seems hesitant. So that's an example of that goes back to what I was just talking about on that goal line play. He just wasn't flowing up in there and flying up in there to make the play, and in a way got in the way of the linebacker.
Yeah. I don't think that Jimmy Ward is a problem by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not saying that that's what Chewy's saying at all. I think Ward will be fine. I think Ward and Tart are, playing the way that we expect them to play. They've been kind of like the safety valve for that defense, and they're I think as long as they stay healthy, which should be which should be on the 49ers jersey, right? As long as they stay healthy, I think that secondary will be fine. We saw them kind of be able to, save the corners whenever there was like an issue with that as well. So,
and you saw Jimmy Ward make some really nice plays in coverage yesterday. There was I think a couple there. I know there for sure there was one deep ball when they're going left to right that he's there breaking it up. There was a couple of times where the safeties made really good plays down the throw. So talking about saying that they're having issues with some tackling or whatever, you got it's a give and take. There might be some issues that you can point over here, but they're doing really well. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other with some of the stuff.
I like that. So this is a question that something that's kind of jumped out to me, Jack. So even if we look at last year's offense, I felt like there was a lot more explosion in the offense. It seemed like there was a lot more Kyle Shanahan putting it in the hands of his weapons and letting them kind of just, play, be athletes, be explosive. You saw like some, just get the ball into Brandon Ayuk's hands, just get the ball into Debo's hands, whether it be a jet sweep, whether it be a wide receiver screen, and then let them go, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like we're not seeing that as much this game, right? And I think we have more weapons now than we had, even last season, and definitely better quarterback play. Is Kyle Shanahan limiting the explosiveness of this offense, or do you think there's something else going on?
So this is, I'm going to say a couple things on this one. The first one I think is going to maybe make some people say, huh? But one of the reasons I think last year's offense might have been a little bit more explosive without Garoppolo was because the quarterback threw the ball down the field more. Nick Mullins, for all of his faults, did throw the ball, did push the ball down the field to the outside, 15 yards down the field on the outside and so on, more often than Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's part of it there.
He threw it to the other team a lot too.
I understand. That's why I understand that. But I'm saying
I'm just messing with you, Jack.
Yeah, I think I think that all goes into why I laugh when there's so much angst about Jimmy Garoppolo. But I don't think he's holding it back. Yesterday's game I think this conversation really goes back to what we talked about with the offensive line. Yesterday's game, they weren't able to take the shots down the field that they might be able to do against Green Bay because they were getting too much pressure to really be able to get those guys down there. Because Deebo Samuel, I think, was still the top targeted receiver on the 49ers. Yeah. They just weren't able to get him in space to let them make the plays. My favorite play of the day yesterday for Deebo, other than the deep, the one play that set up the touchdown at the end of the first half, I think it was a jet sweep to the left side, and it's the one if you watch on Twitter, there was you see Trent Williams out there blocking, leading the way, and he he kicks his guy out to the sideline, and Deebo comes cutting that thing up, and he just puts his shoulder down in the defensive back and runs him over for another 3 yards.
Right.
And I don't know if he gets the first down. I think he might end up a yard short or whatnot. But that was my favorite dang play of the whole game from him because I had to stand up. I told my girlfriend, "Look, watch this guy. Come watch this. This guy's a receiver. Look at the way this guy's running the ball because he's a special talent and." Outside of that, I don't really know. The explosiveness, I think, has to do with the way that the defense was playing him yesterday and the quarterback was limiting him a little bit with his inability to hit some of these throws.
So here's my thing. Against the Eagles last year, we got to see the most wow play from the 49ers offense all year, which was that just wide receiver screen to Brandon Ayuk, and then he hurdled that guy and ended up scoring a touchdown. Right, we have that playability, but Kyle Shanahan hasn't thrown one wide receiver screen to Brandon Ayuk, and we know what he's capable of. We've seen it, right? He's not playing a guy like Trey Sermon, even though Trey Sermon got hurt. Mm-hmm. You saw the explosiveness from that one run where he gained 8 yards, and it's like, how are these guys sitting on our bench when our offense is struggling to move the ball down the field? These aren't plays where you need to have, your offensive line keep guys back. These are the dink and dunk type plays, but we're not putting it in the hands of these weapons that we have. That's why I'm asking: is Kyle Shanahan doing this on purpose, or what do you think? What do you think that is?
No, I understand your question, and the one thing that I would say, like for example, let's take the Sermon play for example, right? The Sermon play comes in the fourth quarter. The defense wasn't playing as good at that point. The 49ers had softened them up. By the time Sermon finally got into the game, the 49ers running game had started to get going. It's the same thing with JaMycal Hasty. JaMycal Hasty finally got into the game when the run game was finally getting. Hasty's big run was 21 yards. There was nobody within 3 yards of him until he got down to where he was getting tackled because it was blocked up so well. He's running that ball through. Just following the blocks. It was wide open when you watched the replay, especially from the end zone. That thing was blocked up beautiful, and I think it's a similar situation with Sermon. He looks good because compared to Mitchell, because by that point in the game, everything started to open up. Because, one of the things when you're playing on defense and you're down 14-3, that you're going to do is you're going to try to make plays. Those guys were frustrated as hell yesterday, and you could see that in the fourth quarter with Philadelphia. Those guys were frustrated. They didn't want to be on the field anymore. Because they were stuck on the field a lot in the second half of the game, and they didn't want to be out there. And that's what led to the last field goal for the 49ers, why they got up 17-3 and everything. So I mean, it's just, is he holding him back? And going back to your question, is he limiting him? I don't know if it's Kyle Shanahan as much as the quarterback.
Yeah, but even with this quarterback, we've seen a much more explosive version of this offense. And that's the reason why I'm thinking is, like a wide receiver screen fits everything that you're talking about this offense was doing. And you have guys like Debo, obviously, who is getting the ball. Even a guy like Kittle doing a tight end screen, or a guy like Brandon Ayuk, they're just not being utilized. Like, and I don't know. I want to push back because I think that's kind of like a cop out answer that Trey Sermon looked that way because the defense was beat up. Trey Sermon could be that way even when the defense isn't being beat up. What I'm saying is there's a talent like that that's not being utilized, right? Even if it was a product of maybe a tired defense, still that ability is on our bench, not being used. Brandon Ayuk hurdling over defenders and being able to score touchdowns is sitting on our bench, not being utilized, right? We saw Brandon Ayuk make an unbelievable catch that kind of bailed out a throw from Jimmy that was in the right place, but maybe a little bit high. And Brandon Ayuk just went out and caught that ball. For that to be only the two attempts, that the second attempt that he got, to me is kind of like, what is going on? Like, Kyle Shanahan is so much of a creative guy to not be utilizing these weapons. In my mind, I don't know. I just think that to me, it's baffling because I understand Nick Mullins is able to throw the ball down the field more, but I don't even think of those as the explosive plays. I'm talking about the Yak Boys, and they tried to use it so much in the telecast against the Eagles. Like, they kept calling the Yak Boys, but we never saw Kittle get the ball. We never saw Ayuk get the ball. It was just a Yak boy, which was Debo, and nobody else is getting it. So I'm just like wondering what is that? Like, why is that? Why aren't we seeing more from these guys that are just supreme talents, in my book, at least?
Well, Kittle was the second. There was Ayuk, I think, had 8 targets. Hasty had 5, and Kittle had 4. Those were your top 3. And
yeah, but four to the highest paid tight end to me is, you're not utilizing them as much as you could.
But they were keeping him in the block, I think, was part of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
And they're having to keep him. So, I mean, that's why I'm saying it kind of goes back to the defense and what they were having to do. The Sermon deal, it might sound like a cop-out, but here's the deal. With Sermon and the running game and everything, I don't think that Sermon makes that explosive play in the first half. I just don't. It wasn't there. It wasn't there for the 49ers in the first half. In the first half, everything was clogged up. Even on the tosses that they were getting, it seemed like the way that the 49ers offense was going in the first half, when they gained 3 or 4 yards on a toss, it seemed like a big play. At least that's the way it felt like to me.
Let's take Sermon because we haven't seen him in the NFL be explosive. Are you telling me a jet sweep to Brandon Ayuk won't do something good? Are you telling me a wide receiver screen to Brandon Ayuk won't be able to gain 5 to 10 yards?
It might be able to. They, instead of using Ayuk, they did it to Juwan Jennings, and I think he gained like 8 or something like that, right?
You mean that? I don't know. I don't remember that play offhand. I just remember the touchdown to Juwan Jennings. But but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think an Ayuk. I think Ayuk is. I don't know. I really wish they would tell us the truth about what's going on with Ayuk, because that is a mystery to me. He is way too much of a talent to be targeted 2 times in a game, in my eyes.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you that he should be getting more targets. Was it only 2 times? He only had 1 catch and the 1 ball that was overthrown. That was it.
Yeah.
It wasn't 3. Okay.
Yeah, that was the 2. At least that I remember in my head, like keeping track of.
I know that he was targeted one less time than Trent Sherfield yesterday.
Yeah, man. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I wonder if Kyle Shanahan. I do think that obviously the defense does clearly play a role, but I also think that there's things that we saw from Kyle Shanahan in previous games with the same quarterback that he was able to still scheme up some explosive plays and get the balls into his playmakers' hands a little bit more than I've seen in these first 2 weeks. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he's just building into it, right? He's also in the second game of his season as well. So
I think there's definitely things to look at, and he's not perfect, that's for sure, with his play calling and the way that he does it. I think yesterday he managed the game really well because of all the problems that they were having to kind of limit themselves with what they were doing and not try to force things down the field. Mm-hmm. He kind of played to his defense a little bit, with some of what they were doing. So,
hey, Harold Murillo, this is why you are my favorite right now. I think it is Kyle who's limiting the offensive play. Anybody who agrees with me will always get on the show because I need some validation in my life.
There you go.
I'll let you go with this one. All right, so we've seen the 49ers play for 2 weeks, clearly 2 victories. However, there's been some question marks, I think. What questions do you have about this team, Jack, after watching these last 2 games?
If they get stuck in games like they were, where they're in situations where Garoppolo's not able to get the ball down the field, like yesterday, where he's missing the throws down the field and it becomes a dink and dunk type of game like what we saw yesterday, is that repeatable over and over again? It's a question that I had of him last year when he came back and he won those games against the Rams and New England. And then we saw what happened in week 3 of that. So if they're not able to get that going, is that something that they're going to be able to have success with throughout the course of the season? That would be question number 1 for me. Question number 2 is, what are you going to do with this running back room? The 49ers have got to run the ball in order for them to be successful. I don't think Garoppolo can carry them for multiple weeks. So how are you going to fix that up now? You got to have one healthy running back. What are you going to do there? So that's your second one. When is George Kittle going to break out? When's he going to make a big play? When's George Kittle going to step up? I'm going to leave that at that when it comes to George Kittle for right now. When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, can the interior start to stop the run? They did it for a short period of time yesterday, but they've got to be able to do that over and over again for them to be successful this year. I think those are some of the main questions.
I think one more question is, are these cornerbacks going to be able to hold up when the quality of receiver goes up?
I'll change that. I'm going to change that for you, because I think the bigger key there is, because that's a great question that I should have thought about. Are the cornerbacks going to be able to hold up when they start facing good quarterbacks?
Quarterbacks, yeah. And, especially in the NFC West, you're going up against Lockett, who's having a phenomenal season. Metcalf, who we know is a stud. Obviously, D-Hop, who's lighting the world on fire. Kyler Murray, to me, is the runaway favorite for MVP, after 2 weeks. I think, and then, I think that you touched on everything. And then the last thing I think was just the cornerback thing. The good thing that I don't have questions with now is DeMeco Ryans' ability to make adjustments. That was a question after week 1 that I had. And his ability, like the fact that he looked at tape and basically crumpled up the piece of paper in the playbook that said wide 9 and just threw it away, I think is a really good sign, because, one thing about Shanahan that people talk about is his stubbornness, to kind of like go out of what he's used to doing and whatnot. To see DeMeco Ryans completely change the scheme and be able to have the defense play as well as they did with new pieces. Obviously Drake Greenlaw wasn't there, Barrett and Mosley weren't there, and to have them still perform at a high level against a team that put up 40 points, in the previous week, I think that that's one question that was answered for me within the 2 weeks. But questions for me, I think the biggest thing are going to be that cornerback. If Lenore goes down, then what do we do, right? So, and then the running back room, I'm not as worried about the running back room because I didn't know who Mitchell was. And he came out and, turned out to be a superstar, or do really, really well. I didn't know who Matt Breida was. And all of a sudden he came out and started, there's this guy named Raheem Mostert I had no idea about. He came out. I just think that Kyle Shanahan does really well with these running backs. And I think that these guys are going to come in and do well. You're seeing it in Baltimore right now, right? I thought that their running game was going to just go to trash because all their starters were down and out, but they're still having a very solid running game. Obviously, they have this guy named Lamar Jackson that helps out a lot, but even their running backs, I think, are still doing pretty solid jobs. So I think that's one position, if we are going to have injuries, that you can find replacements that could still be very effective. Cornerback, on the other hand, that's a little bit tougher.
Yeah. Yep. No, those are all really good points. And I think the other piece is, the 49ers defense has played pretty good against some bad teams, and we talked about this. I think it might have already been one of our questions or with the one you mentioned, but the next 3 weeks are going to show how good they really are, because they're going to be facing Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and then Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is the one that he brings a totally different dynamic to the
Right.
field than those first two.
Yeah. And for me, I think we have to see the team go 2-1 in this 3-game stretch to really, believe that this team can, be a playoff contender and, really win out this season and, be one of the top teams in the NFC. In my mind, at least, 2-1, or really, really close competitive games that came down to, a last second field goal or, some bad luck here and there. What about you? What do you need to see out of these next 3 games, out of the 49ers for you to be comfortable with the team?
No, I think you're right. I think a 3-1 record over or 2-1 record over these next 3 is going to be a good mark. I think Green Bay. If you're watching what Green Bay is doing tonight, their offense is doing pretty good against Detroit, but their defense really isn't doing a whole lot, right? And so I think you're looking at the defense is going to be stressed next week. The offense is going to be able to have to come out and play better. If they can go 2-1, they're going to be. I'll tell you what. If they go 2-1, 49er fans are not going to like it because they lost to. They're probably going to lose to either the Seahawks or the Cardinals. That's my guess. And it's going to be all about not being able to win the NFC West. That's my guess, just based off of what I've heard from them over the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, but one thing that we did, end this on a positive note, Jack, we did talk about the 49ers to be contenders in the NFC West have to be able to beat the teams that they're supposed to beat. And to come out and beat Detroit, to come out and beat Philly, I know Grant put up a tweet saying when we looked at the schedule, we all expected the 49ers to be 2-0 after this. So why are we celebrating? Well, we've thought a lot of things about the 49ers in the past, what they should be, and they didn't get there. To actually see expectations be matched, I think is something to be excited about. They were gritty games. They found ways to win, even though not all cylinders were, going at the same time. And to win in the NFL is tough. To win in the NFL on the road, away from your family for 2 weeks, I think this could have been a trap game. And I think the 49ers responded really, really well against a young team that has a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. So to me, it was a very impressive victory in the sense that it needed to be done. They did it, and it was never really in doubt that the 49ers were going to win this game. Even though the score was low and it ended up being, a 6-point game, I never really felt like the 49ers were going to lose the game. I don't know if you felt that same way.
No, I don't know. The way that, as I was watching the game, the way that I felt about it was that there was definitely some nervousness in that first half, even throughout that most of that first half, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was like I said, I keep saying on Twitter, was they just needed to weather the storm. I even wrote that in my article after the game. They weathered the storm. They got through that really hard part of the game, which was the intensity from the Philadelphia fans for their home opener, all that kind of stuff. And they just kind of weathered the storm. And then they just went out and they took care of business. And that's something that we've seen it from Shanahan's team in 2019. It's something that we saw for over and over and over again in 2011 and 2012 and 2013 from those Harbaugh teams. Mm-hmm. So as I watched that game, I just, I didn't really get too frustrated with a lot of it. There was definitely some frustration with some of the quarterbacking play, but I never really felt like it was in doubt until, second half. The 49ers blew it and kind of opened it up, and you felt pretty good once they got up 14-3.
Right. So what Jack is basically saying is the 49ers are going to go to the Super Bowl. And that's our show, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do
Nice
want to
setup.
appreciate everybody, being in the chat. Jack, I want to give you some time before we head out. What can people look forward to this week from either your streaming or your writing this week?
I'm going to do a write up tomorrow. Tomorrow, you'll see. It's called 49er Rewind. It's kind of my after the game, I do have a report, but then I give it a couple days and come back and hit it again with what my key takeaways from the game. So that'll be out tomorrow. I'm going to be jumping from you to a stream with Ben Camper, I think his name is, the Camper Report. Okay. I'm going to be jumping over and doing a stream with him right now. But then tomorrow, as long as Grant still wants me on, I'll be on with him at 3, and then I'll be doing Niner Chatter tomorrow, probably about 6 o'clock. We'll hit up Niner Chatter and get the faithful on the phone and start to hear some of their takes on the game and where they are. And then I'll be on for sure on Thursday with Jesse for the Hammer and Nail show.
Yep. And the only thing I want to plug, I do have shows going on, pretty much every day this week. But the thing that I really have been plugging, I plugged it yesterday, I'm plugging it today. Right after the games, I am doing a live stream with call-ins from the faithful. I want you guys to be the stars, to be able to get your instant reactions from the game. So please subscribe to the channel. We'll be putting that link in, and we're going to do it after every single game. Right after the game, your chance to be able to, talk about what you guys felt and all of those takes. You guys are the stars. We're calling it Sound Off on So Real Sports Talk. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Thank you once again, Jack, for being the superstar that you are. Guys, everybody have a great night. Stay hydrated, be safe, and we will see you again very, very soon. Take care.